Welcome. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to give you the highlights, just barely skimming the surface of what Dr. Joe Dispenza's research and the Heart Math Institute research, how this research ties up to the work that Mary Magdalene was doing in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I call this talk, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Please Meet Mary Magdalene. She is the first living demonstration, according to the Gospel of Mary, of what your research is discovering. And so everybody's been talking about Joe's research as if he's discovered it, when actually Mary Magdalene, what I'm noticing, was a living demonstration of what one would call living above the battlefield. But it totally ties in. There are so many examples in her gospel of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, of what she did. So I'm like really excited. It's really the idea of higher consciousness and co-creating in living energies. And her connection is to this phenomena called visioning, which is not seen with the body's eyes. Visioning is a connection to divine mind. So she says in her gospel, I will now speak to you of that which has not been given to you to hear. I had a vision. And she's talking to the disciples because Peter is asking her what she looks like. She got some information that he wasn't privy to. And of course, he's very sensitive about that because, first of all, they don't like the fact that a woman was allowed by Jesus into the inner circle. So he wants to know what's up. How did she find out anything? Of course, the thing is, she was given the ears to hear because she was paying attention. She was doing the work. So then in the gospel, it also says, this is why I tell you, be in harmony. Now, this is a simple sentence, but it's a powerful sentence. And it really has to do with your dedication, your way of operating. So this is a great chart that kind of illustrates this, because it explains that living in a higher consciousness means that we're in acceptance, we're at choice, we're choosing love over fear, that we understand that we're a cause, that we have 100% responsibility, that we have a connection with our higher consciousness so that we are accessing solutions that are more divine, and we're open to feedback that gives us clarity, and then we can manifest a greater abundance and we can respond instead of react. Whereas when we live below the line in what we might call the egoic life, we're full of judgment and fear, and everything's a problem, and we're at the effect of everything, and we want to blame everybody and everything. So it's not a pretty life. So how do we get above the line? Well, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, fundamental and primary teachings, and I'm using this translation by Jean Leloup, because it is one of the better translations, and it really translates more to oneness rather than the Protestant father-child translation. So I prefer this translation. And Loop has some very powerful commentaries and awarenesses about Magdalene's experiences as she outlines in the gospel. So the first primary teaching that is incredibly important, it says that if you are out of balance, you take inspiration from the manifestations of your true nature. For those who have ears, let them hear. Well, if anyone's here watching this video, there's an indication that you possibly have ears to hear. So, Dr. Josa Dispenza, Magdalene is the first living demonstration, according to the Gospel of Mary, of what your research is discovering. And I would like to give credit where credit is due, because this material was suppressed, and we only really had the Gospel available with a good, clear English translation by Joseph Rowe in 2000. Even though it was discovered earlier and it never really was in our presence in our minds. So now there's people teaching about it, and you can find all kinds of videos on it. And I'm doing classes as well. So you can check that out as well. So Dr. Joe Dispenza's video that I was watching about what he calls learn how to reprogram your mind with these steps were the same steps that Magdalene herself speaks of. So this is an important clip. Unfortunately, because we only have a short time here, I can highlight. I'm going to just point you to the direction of it. And at the end, we're going to be giving you a free gift of the full talk with all of these clips are in it so that you can actually watch them and learn more. But this is where you would want to go. So how is it that you take the inspiration, this first step, from manifesting of your true nature? Well, this is where, first off, you have to look at what is your true nature. Okay. So your true nature is your joy, your happiness, your peace. And when you're in a state of consciousness where you're experiencing these things, it's inspiring. And so when you remember a time when you manifest it, it does what Joe Dispenza talks about in his research that is critical to achieving these higher states of consciousness, is that you have to be in an inspired, elevated feeling. And this is a picture I found that demonstrates what I used to do as a little kid. I'd run down, we lived on the beach, and I would run down the beach on a full moon night, and I'd be singing and dancing Broadway musicals, and it was so uplifting and inspiring, and I'd just be beside myself, just in so much joy. So according to Joe Dispenza, you need to remember a time when you felt these elevated emotions, these elevated states. And then by accessing that memory, and you go into a feeling mode, and you can bring it into present time. So it's a fundamental teaching of his and his research of what he found. So his research, he started to discover, because he healed his back, a broken back, without having to have all the operations and surgeries. And then he would just with his mind. And then he began to teach it. And he's like trying to figure out, how do you get people to understand? How do you become able to access what he calls how to become supernatural? And so this is where he outlines and explains this process about having to remember a time when you're in the elevated state of consciousness. So this is another clip that you want to watch, because it directly correlates with what Mary Magdalene shares about her experience of how she got to the elevated state of consciousness. So Dr. Joe talks about thoughts, actions, and feelings. And when we take inspiration from the feelings in the form of a memory, it brings those feelings into the present moment, even though we may be just lying in our bed meditating. But it gives us an opportunity to actually feel that. And then Joe Dispenza decided to join with HeartMath Institute to do some more research on the impact on brain and heart coherence, because he realized that was key to making this shift. And what is the shift that happens is that when people become fully illuminated in these memories, these elevated feelings, they rise up to a place where they now are able to achieve what they call gamma brainwave state of consciousness, which is a wholehearted, open-hearted, pure state of wholeness. Well, in a pure state of wholeness, there is no illness, because illness is of corrupted nature. It's our thinking and our feelings and our actions that are corrupted by our negativity, rather than when we're in our divine state of an open-hearted, wholehearted state. It's just not possible, because the kinds of hormones that are being released in the body are healing hormones rather than the cortisol hormones that are destructive and damaging to our body. So being in a heart coherent state of consciousness is really important. So they were looking at the difference between when you're frustrated and what does the heart do, and then when you choose, make the choice, because you're above the line and you can choose to go into appreciation. And so when you do make these choices, you move into different brainwave states. And the top one and the pinnacle one that he was trying to get people to get into, which Magdalene achieved, is, I believe, is called the awakened Christ consciousness. This is the gamma brainwave state. And it's at the gamma brainwave state that he noticed when he had people at his trainings. Took about 7 days to get people to the place where they were able to be in the experience of the gamma brainwave state. And they had them monitored, over 8,000 brain scans and whatnot. And he would tell the researchers that had university researchers there, and he'd say, look, that monitor there, that woman's getting ready to pop. And then they would look over to the woman, and tears would be streaming down her face, because she'd be going into the elevated, intense Christ consciousness state of being, which is like glorious. So this is his video where you can learn about, what are all these brain waves, and what role do they play, and how do we move from one to the other? And I believe that Magdalene, and this is a painting by George Latour, that shows Magdalene in what is called a fully realized state, or what the Gospel of Mary Magdalene would call the full anthropos state, a wholehearted, whole consciousness state of being. And interestingly, I became aware of this painting because another George Latour painting showed up in the movie The Little Mermaid. And I was curious, why did they have this painting of Mary Magdalene? It's called The Smoking Flame in The Little Mermaid. And the Ariel is diving down. She's half human. She wants to be fully realized. She wants to be fully human, right? That's our journey to awakening, is to become fully realized, fully human. And so she goes down and she lifts up all the way to this state of consciousness. And it turned out that there were 3 different paintings. These paintings depicted by George Latour the step-by-step process of just how she did it. So she was feeling into the passion, but you see how her blouse is off her shoulders, very sexy. It's like, this is a deep passion. And then she concentrated fully until she reached that full realization state. In other words, she stayed above the line. She used all the tools above the line until she was able to see reflected back to her the Christ consciousness, the skull that's in the mirror. And then she achieves this full-bodied knowing where without and within are the same. So Joe says that if we wait for anything outside of us to make us happy, then we are not following the quantum law. Now, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is totally full of the quantum law. And this is something that was written close to 2,000 years ago, right? And that's another class. We are relying on the outer to change the inner. So that's a really important thing, because it is within the divine consciousness of this nous, or divine mind, that we overcome the without within. So this is a critical step that we learn to do. Then she did the work to overcome it by this practice of meditating on the light, and this deep, passionate dedication that she had to discovering the light within herself, rather than looking over there and looking over there. No, it's over here, it's over there. She went within to find it. And so she's tapping into the divine mind, and the artist portrayed that by having her mind on the Christ skull. And then she enters in through the silence to contemplate the light, so she can understand. And the light is fluid, you'll see there. And so she goes into that deep state. And then what happens is she enters into the gamma Christ consciousness state. So you see the mirror. I blew it up because it's kind of dark in the other original picture. And you can see that her face should be reflected in the mirror, but instead it's the Christ mind that's reflected in the mirror. And the third eye is fully blown open. So it's very powerful. And then this is the last painting that in the series where he shows you her blouse is up, she's sitting up proper, she's got fleur de lis, gold and gilded mirror now. This candle has become solid because she's now solid in her knowing. The gnosis, the pearls are thrown before her on the table, because you don't throw pearls before swine, but she's not swine. She is the enlightened one. So you can see this is really gorgeous. So now she is totally above the line, and And we now have the science, thank God for Dr. Joe Dispenza's work and the Heart Math Institute, that is behind all of these ideas. This is the mastery that we're all on our journey for. And we've missed so much because we didn't have the opportunity to be raised. And we didn't even find this material until recently. And it's still not even adopted by the church as being something that should be studied and evaluated. So as you see with many of these women on the call today, and all the other Magdalene scholars, we're dedicated to getting the information about the suppression out. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Blessed be.